Hello there, beautiful joy seeker, and welcome back to the I Am Changing podcast. I'm your host, Karen Humphries, and I'm a change facilitator. This is already episode 79, and based on a couple of recent blogs that I wrote, the first of which is called The Power of a Family Code Word. Call a timeout, not a war. Now, this is kind of a reiteration of episode 3, Practice the Pause, but it goes into a little bit more science because there's a certain reality we all face. When you spend time with the same people within shared spaces, there will be times of big feelings. However, when people can't neurologically co-regulate in a functional manner, this can lead to everyone feeling like a hot mess. Every family experiences moments when emotions can run high and we lose our cool and our perception of neurological safety decreases. And this is often triggered when voices get louder, patience gets shorter, someone storms off, someone cries, someone says something that they later wish they hadn't. I think we can all put our hand up and say, yeah, I felt that lands for me. I don't want to say I'm guilty of that because guilt is a shame word. The problem is that this problem isn't that families experience conflict. My perspective, the critical issue as I see it from a clinical perspective, is that most families don't have a plan for what to do when those big emotions take over. And this is where the family code word can become one of the most powerful tools in your household. So, what is a family code word? Deploying a code word is a pre-agreed word or phrase that means we need a pause. It sounds ridiculously simple. I know. And in theory, you'd be right. But if you are triggered, if you're running your survival behavioral program, if you're feeling heightened, that code word might be the only thing that you can communicate in that moment. A code word isn't deployed because someone is wrong. It's not deployed because someone is in trouble. The code word is simple because when emotions rise, the reality is someone would benefit in that moment to be able to reset, to breathe, to regulate themselves. So think of a code word a bit like a gift. It's a timeout. And why does it work? And I think when we actually start to understand that, it becomes more meaningful and your motivation to want to use it is there. So, why do we use it? Deploying a code word whilst in a heightened moment provides you with 4 things. Firstly, you're interrupting your survival program. Who doesn't want that? Secondly, the pause gives you moments to take a deep breath and regulate your nervous system. And out all the way. Oh, thirdly, the timeout from being triggered enables you to restore emotional safety and allow your logical brain to turn back on. Whilst our survival program turns on instantly, it's part of our sympathetic nervous system. It's our threat alert. It's just instantaneous. It's designed to keep you safe. The re-regulation back to feeling rest and digestful and parasympathetic state takes a little bit. You kind of got to encourage those frontal lobes to turn back on. And the 4th thing is returning to a situation and people that first triggered you when you're feeling calmer enables you to attempt to preserve loving connections. That's really important when we're maintaining relationship. And so how do we create a family code word? There's no real words for when you choose. There's no reason or, method that you choose your code word for your family, but I encourage something that is at least neutral and maybe a little fun. So here's some examples. Pineapple, possum place, koala mode, banana bread, campfire. Now, that might not float your boat and you'll have to come up with something that's relevant for you. How does the method work? Here's the family reset process, how you use your code word. Having a conversation, someone gets triggered, You can see their crazy eyes activate. You could be saying the word to start the process to enable them to go and take that step away. So you speak the code word. And because you've had a discussion before we use the code word, everyone knows when the code word is spoken, conversation stops. This step is not negotiable. Everyone takes 3 slow, deep breaths. And if you need to, you step out for a moment to regulate yourself and you give yourself a couple of minutes. Take 5 minutes and then come back together, reunite when you're regulated, reconnect with those that you love. Now, if you're struggling to find your calm and perhaps more time is required and you expand the time intervals that you take breaks from the triggering conversation, you might need 10 minutes. You might need 30. You might even need a whole day. The trick is that you can continue to deploy the code word if the conversation remains triggering. So if you still can't discuss a subject after a 24-hour period, leave it for a week or explore where mediation may be required. Maybe you need a trusted adult or another person in your group to come in and sit and not take sides, but observe, is everyone having their chance to speak and is everyone being heard? And so remember, sometimes our survival program is so hypervigilant that we can need assistance to returning to our calm state before having that chat again. So let me ask you this. If your family had one word and it was a code word that meant we love each other, what would it be? We need a moment. Let's reset. What would your family code word be? And so sit with it. You might need to pause as I move into the next blog, why code words are especially helpful for neurodivergent families. Because let's face it, when we're neurospicy, and I can say this because I am, when the nervous system speaks louder than our words, it's the nervous system that runs our survival program before the words can be formed. And what I see from my own life and clinically is many neurodivergent children and adults experience the world differently. They think, feel, and process life differently compared to neurotypical people. And this often leaves them feeling isolated, like a bit like a black sheep. I can put my hand up. I felt like a black sheep all my life. Neurodiverse brains often process information and sensory input and emotions and environmental stimuli with a greater intensity than neurotypical individuals. So, where you might see or hear something and think, oh, that's just a book dropping on a bench, a neurodiverse person might add in, what am I smelling when I hear that sound, and looking all around for a saber-toothed tiger. And so, what might seem insignificant to one person can leave another feeling overwhelmed, chaotic, or even threatening to another. And worse, a neurotypical person can often recognize when they're triggered long before their neurodiverse counterpart. This is especially true for individuals living with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, sensory processing differences, and other forms of neurodivergence all experience this. And so from the outside, a reaction may appear disproportionate to what you're observing in the world. For a neurodiverse person, their internal survival chaos escalates and surpasses critical mass quite rapidly. And this can leave a neurotypical parent quite frantic and extremely distressed, just like their triggered child. And no one wins in that situation, but frustration does build. So if you've got a family that is like a neuro spice rack, there's a little bit of everything. And the reality is, in this day and age, we've all got a bit of something. You may experience inexplicable chaos when a child bursts into tears because their socks feel uncomfortable. You might be chasing them down the hallway to get ready for school in the morning. They just need to put their socks on and they don't like the feel of them. Your teenager might become irritable after a busy day at school, or an adult might come home and shut down after a crowded social event or walking through the supermarket. These neurodiverse reactions are often loud, tear-inducing chaos. They appear on the outset as rapid onset because the neurodiverse individual's mask collapses very quickly. People observing the reaction often misunderstand this as a negative behavior, attention seeking, defiant, or emotional immaturity. And yes, in some circumstances, all of those are true. But in reality, what I see clinically are frequently the signs of an individual's nervous system experiencing overwhelm and overload, and the individual feels misunderstood and they don't have language or can't access their language when they're triggered to seek help. So when we're feeling reactive, chaotic behavior, that's not the problem. The behavior is a parent's cue or signal that something different from them is required. Sometimes it's a shift in communication, but mostly it's a nervous system urgently requiring regulation for everyone involved. Sensory overload and emotional flooding is a big thing for neurodiverse people. Our human nervous system is constantly scanning the environment for information and potential threats. For neurodivergent individuals, this scanning process can be significantly amplified by simple things like fluoro lights that others barely notice may feel painfully bright to the neurodivergent. Background conversations may sound equally as important as the voice of the person directly in front of you. Certain textures, smells, sounds, lights, unexpected changes can rapidly increase survival nervous system activation. This is clinically known as sensory overload. And when activated, signals to the brain that the individual may be under threat, when in actual fact, what's happening is the neurodivergent's mind just can't process everything in a rapid time. As the sensory input accumulates, the brain's capacity to process all of that information efficiently, it diminishes. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for reasoning, decision making, emotional regulation, and communication, it becomes less accessible. And at the same time, what's activated is survival based regions of the brain become more active. And this often results in emotional flooding. That's classified as a state where feelings become so intense that they overwhelm the individual's ability to think clearly, communicate effectively, or self regulate. Depending on the person, emotional flooding can lead to meltdowns, shutdowns, withdrawal, aggression, tears, irritability, emotional numbness, difficulty finding words, increased sensitivity of their senses. Importantly, these responses are not conscious choices. I feel like I need to say that again. When a neurodiverse person is experiencing emotional flooding, those responses, their reactions are not conscious. It's not a choice. They're experiencing an uncontrollable subconscious survival reaction. They are adaptive nervous system responses to a brain and body that have exceeded their current capacity. And so, why do traditional approaches often fail? When a child or an adult is emotionally flooded, they're not operating from a place of logic. They're running their survival program. And unfortunately, many common responses unintentionally increase dysregulation. Any attempt at negotiation for a neurodiverse child or adult who is emotionally flooded often results in big failure. Statements such as, just calm down, stop crying, you're overreacting. It's really not a big deal. Just use your words. Seriously, I could bitch slap some people when I'm in that state. Usually, these comments are well intended. They are likely, however, to cause further escalation and into a full-blown meltdown where a neurodiverse person can remain emotionally flooded for hours. For an individual to then be able to respond appropriately, to one of those instructions, they require access to higher level cognitive functioning at precisely the moment when those parts of the brain are least available. They've gone offline, they're disintegrated, they're dysregulated. When working clinically with individuals, my role is to determine where the loss of neural integration has occurred, sides, fronts, back, top, middle, and diffuse the stress associated with it and teach somatic breath work, teach exercises that help reintegration, bring the person back to a grounded state of calm. Sadly, from a neurobiological perspective, these survival reactions can create several unintended consequences for the neurodiverse individual. It can increase feelings of shame. It can reinforce a sense of being misunderstood. It can escalate nervous system activation. It can create a sense of emotional isolation, and it can reduce psychological safety. When individuals feel judged for their emotional experience, the nervous system often interprets this as an additional threat. And so the individual remains heightened. And when they repeat an experience like going to school, that then becomes an unsafe space from a subconscious perspective. And the result is frequently more dysregulation rather than less. And so, how does a code word create safety? One simple yet powerful strategy many neurodivergent families find helpful is the use of the shared code word, a code word that's predetermined. It's an agreed word, phrase, or symbol, or even a hand signals that communicate my nervous system is overwhelmed right now. I've got big feelings. The purpose of this code word is to not stop emotions. The purpose is to recognize the person in distress before they escalate further. And examples of the code word might be red light, cactus, I'm feeling prickly, pause, turtle time, I need to stick my head in my shell and hide for a bit, storm warning, and we all know what that means. Or it might be a favorite animal name. It might be a colored card. It might be a visual cue. Because remember, for the neurodiverse person, when they're emotionally flooded, when they're heightened, sometimes not everyone can find their words, but they can point to a chart or find a card and hold it up and breathe. The specific word matters far less than the meaning attached to it. And over time, the code word becomes a shared language between all the family members. And rather than explaining every sensation, thought, or emotion, a single word can communicate that an entire nervous system has changed state and no longer feels safe. What are some benefits of using the code words? Well, one, predictability. Neurodivergent nervous systems often thrive on predictability, and a code word creates a clear and consistent pathway for communicating during moments of stress. Everyone knows the signal means and what will happen next, and that's a timeout. And if nothing else, the triggered individual can feel safe knowing that their retreat to safety is now possible and respected. Predictability can reduce uncertainty, which in turn reduces threat perception and reduces that. Number two, clarity. When emotional flooding occurs, language often becomes difficult. And after all, when your brain is perceiving you're faced off with a saber-toothed tiger, it's not interested in conversation. The brain is making sure the only role of the nervous system in that moment is survival. Many individuals experience reduced verbal processing during periods of overwhelm. And so a code word provides a concise and accessible alternative to lengthy explanations or hostage negotiations in that moment. Number three, having a code word reduces shame. For me, one of the most significant benefits is the reduction of shame. The code word is an expression of unconditional love and understanding that at that moment, someone is experiencing heightened feelings and support is required right now. There's an additional bonus for the neurodiverse individual. Instead of feeling too much, too sensitive, or difficult, that person learns to recognize their overwhelm signals as a nervous system glitch experience rather than a character flaw. It's like clouds. Feelings come and go, so do clouds. And so the conversation when we deploy the code word is, instead of someone saying, "What's wrong with that person?" they get to ask, "What does your nervous system need right now?" So it's not about you, it's what's happening to you. And so, 4, the code word enables shared responsibility. A code word can help families move away from blame because, let's face it, as generations evolve, I grew up in a generation where children are seen and not heard. So when I had big feelings and got loud and got dramatic and chaotic, I got myself into a lot of trouble. Whereas I parented my child completely differently, but I needed tools and techniques so I didn't become dysregulated as well. But it also helped the grandparents and aunts and uncles step into the space proactively, and we all shared the load of parenting the neurospicy child. Having a neurodiverse individual in the family doesn't equate to having a black sheep. When one person is heightened or experiencing internal chaos, everyone's nervous system co-regulates with those explosive reactions. Do I need to say that again? When one person is dysregulated, the potential for everyone to co-regulate with chaos increases. Deploying the code word is the invitation for everyone to reset themselves, not just the triggered individual, so that when that heightened person comes back, you're calm and grounded enough to hold space for them. So rather than viewing regulation as the sole responsibility of the overwhelmed individual, the family becomes a co-regulating system. Everyone understands the nervous system regulation is a shared process, and this gives and creates greater compassion, collaboration, and connection. And 5, when we use code words, it creates connection before correction. Many parents understandably focus on stopping challenging behavior. They don't want to get embarrassed. They don't want to feel shame themselves. But what they're forgetting is their child's in distress. And when we want to stop that challenging behavior, this is often attributed to your own childhood conditioning, where you've seen and not heard as well. And your need now as a parent to be good. And so you're running that program as well. That's a whole different entire conversation I'll save for another day. But the neuroscience consistently demonstrates that connection must come before correction, because a dysregulated nervous system cannot effectively learn when in survival. Before problem solving, teaching, or discussing consequences, the nervous system first needs to feel safe, and this may involve reducing sensory input, offering physical space, using calm sensory tools, co-regulating through a calm presence, supporting breathing and body awareness. Because remember, you can be maintaining your grounded, centered, calm state and just practice the breath work that needs to be done, and the other person's mirror neurons will want to copy. Cool, right? So continue breathing, continue supporting body awareness in a non-threatening way, provide reassurance without excessive questioning. Only once regulation begins to return does meaningful learning become possible. One of the greatest gifts we can offer neurodivergent children is helping them understand that big emotions are not bad emotions. They're just information. Our body is actually amazing at generating signals when we have unmet needs. And our nervous system activation, sensory overload, uncertainty, fear, frustration, exhaustion, or disconnect, it doesn't matter. When children learn to interpret those signals rather than fear them or avoid them, emotional regulation becomes far more achievable. Every family develops its own language and rhythm. For neurodivergent families, creating a language around nervous system regulation and co regulation and survival states can be deeply empowering. And a code word may sound simple on the surface, yet beneath the single word lies a validation and understanding, safety, and connection. Within families, the code word communicates, I see what's happening. You are not alone. We can navigate this together. And over time, your code word becomes far more than a communication tool. It becomes a shared language of safety. And when safety is present, regulation, resilience, and connection naturally become easier to access for everyone in the room. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. To grow my podcast audience, I am changing. It helps me immensely if you could hit the follow button. I'd be so, so grateful. Thank you also in advance for sharing this podcast within your own change tribe or within your own community for those who may have neurodivergent special individuals. I hope it generates a fire of loving support and proactive discussion of what your code word for your family might be and how you can take charge of your journey steps throughout life, regardless of the challenges that experience brings you. I'm your podcast host, Kaz Humphries, aka The Change Chick, and the I Am Changing podcast is a reminder that we can all choose to change and bloom from within. Thanks for listening.